The night was cold and silent. The alien widow sat alone under the broken roof of an abandoned house. Her thin hands held her empty stomach. It had been 2 days since she last ate. Her eyes were tired, her body weak, and her heart full of sorrow. She remembered the days before the war. Her husband was alive then. Her world was safe and her people had hope. But now, all of that was gone. Her husband had died on the battlefield. Her people had scattered, hiding from enemies, and she was left alone with no family, no food, and no reason to live. Outside, the city ruins were full of danger. Other aliens pushed her away when she came close. They whispered cruel words, calling her useless and cursed. They had their own children to feed, their own families to protect. No one wanted to share even a small piece of bread with a widow. She was invisible to them, or worse, a burden. Her hunger grew sharper. Her throat was dry, her body weak and her mind dizzy. She thought of stealing, but her heart was not ready. She thought of begging, but she knew no one would listen. She thought of dying, but even death felt too heavy. So she sat in the cold, darkness, waiting for something, anything to change. Then she saw it. Far ahead, beyond the broken walls, there was light. Not fire. Not the dim lamps of her people, but the bright, steady glow of human machines. It was a human supply camp, guarded by tall walls and armed soldiers. Her heart beat faster. Humans were dangerous. They were the victors. Of this war, to her people, they were both feared and hated. But humans had food, humans had warmth, and humans had life. The widow's legs trembled as she stood. She took a step toward the camp, then another. Her heart told her to stop, to turn back, but her stomach begged her forward. She moved slowly, carefully hiding in the shadows. Her eyes stayed on the lights, bright like stars against the ruined night. If only she could find one small piece of bread, one warm meal, maybe she could live another day. As she crept closer, her breath caught in her throat. There were human guards, tall and strong, carrying weapons. If they saw her, they might shoot. They might kill. Still, she moved forward, fear mixed with desperation. Every step felt like a gamble between life and death. Then she froze. A sound, soft and strange, reached her ears. Not the voice of a soldier, not the shout of an enemy. It was the voice of a child. She turned, and her eyes widened. A small human girl stood only a few steps away. Her hair was messy, her clothes a little worn, but her face was bright with curiosity. The widow's mouth opened, but no words came. She expected the child to scream, to call the guards, to run away, but the girl did not scream. She only looked at the widow with big, innocent eyes. Then she walked closer, slowly, bravely. The widow stepped back, her body shaking, but the girl did not stop. She tilted her head, studying the alien widow's thin arms, her tired eyes, her empty hands. "You're hungry," the little girl said softly. Her voice was not cruel, not sharp, only gentle. The widow felt tears rise in her eyes, but she quickly looked away, ashamed. She wanted to deny it, to hide her weakness, but her trembling body betrayed her. The girl looked at her again, her face full of thought. Then, without warning, she spoke words that shocked the widow to her core. "If you marry my dad, you'll never be hungry again." The widow's heart stopped, her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. Marry her father, a human soldier, for food? It made no sense at all. Why would a human child say this? Why would she want her alien widow to marry her own father? The words felt like a dream or a trick, but the child was serious. Her eyes steady, her voice true. The widow could not move, could not speak. Her mind raced with fear and confusion. This was madness. Humans hated her kind. Humans called them enemies. And yet this girl was offering not just food, but family. Her stomach growled loudly, her body weak. She wanted to run, but she wanted even more to believe. For the first time in months, she felt something strange, something dangerous. Hope. Then, in the distance, she heard footsteps. Human, Soldiers walking closer, their voices sharp in the night. The little girl looked toward the sound, then quickly grabbed the widow's hand. "Come," she whispered, "before they see you." The widow's heart raced. Her choice was clear: run into the night and starve, or follow this strange little girl into the heart of the enemy camp. She looked at the girl's small hand, holding hers tightly, warm, firm, real, and in that moment her hunger and her fear became one. The widow took a breath and stepped forward. The alien widow followed the little girl through the shadows. Her heart beat fast, her steps shaky, her breath heavy. Every sound made her body jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. She was walking toward danger. Yet the child pulled her hand with trust. It felt impossible, like a dream. Behind them, the voices of human soldiers grew louder. They were close, maybe only seconds away from seeing her. The girl moved quickly, guiding the widow through a hole in the broken fence. They slipped inside before the guards noticed. The widow's chest rose and fell with relief, but fear still burned inside her. The human camp was smaller than she imagined. A few tents, some cooking fires, and a circle of tall wooden walls. Machines hummed quietly, soldiers walked with weapons. The smell of cooked food filled the air, warm and sharp. It made her weak with hunger. Her body longed for even a single crumb. The girl looked back at her with a smile. "You're safe now," she whispered. Safe, the widow thought. How could she be safe here, in the middle of her enemy's camp? Her mind screamed at her to escape, but her stomach told her to stay. As they walked, the widow's thoughts fell back into memory. Her past rose up clear and painful. She had once been a proud wife. Her husband was strong, her protector, her companion. Together they dreamed of building a family, but the war had stolen him. One day, he went to fight, and he never returned. She remembered the knock on her door, the voice that said he was gone. Her world had turned to ash. She had cried until no more tears would come. After that, everything became hunger and silence. Her people had once lived with dignity, but now they were broken, scattered, afraid. Those who survived turned cold and selfish. Even when she begged for food, they turned their faces away. To them, she was just another mouth, another burden. She had no child, no husband, no place. She was nothing. And now, in her lowest moment, a human child was offering her hope. It felt like a cruel joke. The girl tugged her hand again, breaking her thoughts. "Come meet my dad," she said softly. The widow froze. Meet her father, a human soldier. Her heart filled with fear. Would he kill her, laugh at her, or throw her out? Or would he listen to his daughter's strange wish? She stopped walking, her legs stiff. The girl turned back, her eyes wide and innocent. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "He's kind, he listens, he'll understand." But the widow did not believe. Kindness and humans did not belong in the same thought. She had seen humans destroy her peoples, homes, take their food, burn their villages. How could this man be different? Before she could step back, a shadow appeared. A tall figure stood in front of the fire. His shoulders were broad, his face tired, his uniform marked with dirt and smoke. The widow's body shook as she realized this must be the father. The little girl ran to him, her voice cheerful. "Dad, look who I found." The man's eyes shifted to the widow. He said nothing, only watched. The widow lowered her head, afraid to meet his gaze. Her hands trembled, her lips pressed tight. She expected shouting, anger, or the call for guards, but silence filled the space, heavy and strange. The girl's small voice broke that silence. "Dad," she said, "she's hungry." Then, with a child's fearless honesty, she added, "And I told her, if she marries you, she'll never be hungry again." The widow's eyes snapped open in shock. Her heart nearly stopped. The words echoed in the air like thunder. Soldiers sitting near the fire turned to look. Some began to laugh, others frowned. With suspicion, the widow's cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the earth, but the man did not laugh. He looked at his daughter, then at the widow. His face stayed calm, his eyes steady. Finally he spoke, his voice low and firm. "This is not a game, child." The girl pouted. "I'm not joking, Dad. She needs us." The widow could not breathe. Her legs felt weak, her body cold. Every second stretched like an hour. Would this man throw her out or end her life here? Instead, he spoke again, slowly, carefully. "If you stay here," he said to the widow, "you must earn your place." His words carried no anger, only a test. The soldiers around them murmured, some in protest, some in doubt. But the man's eyes did not leave hers. It was not hatred she saw in them, but something else, something harder to believe. Respect. The widow's mind spun. She had expected death. Instead, she was being offered a chance, not a promise of love, not a promise of safety, but a chance to fight for survival. Her stomach growled, her eyes filled with tears. She bowed her head and whispered, "I will try." The little girl clapped her hands in joy. The father only nodded once, and in that moment, the widow's life began to change. But deep inside, she wondered, was this truly a beginning, or just another cruel test in a world that wanted her gone? The alien widow stood frozen by the fire. The human's eyes were sharp, some full of curiosity, some full of hate. She could feel their stares burning against her thin skin. Every part of her screamed to run, but the little girl's hand held her still. The girl's trust was the only thing stronger than her fear. The man, the father, did not look away. His face was rough from battle, his eyes dark with tiredness. But he was not cruel, not mocking, not the monster she had imagined. Instead, he studied her as if weighing something important. The silence around the fire was heavy, broken only by the crackle of flames. "Sit," he said at last, pointing to the ground near the fire. The widow's heart jumped. Was it a command or a trap? Her legs trembled, but she obeyed, lowering herself onto the cold earth. The warmth of the fire touched her skin, and she felt weak with relief. It had been so long since she had sat near real warmth. The little girl hurried to her father's side, smiling. "Dad, she was so hungry," the child said. "We have to help her." Some soldiers nearby muttered, their voices sharp and bitter. "She's an alien," one spat. "The enemy. Throw her out before she steals from us," another hissed. The widow's chest tightened. Her eyes stayed low. Every word was a knife reminding her she did not belong, but the man lifted his hand, silencing them. "She stays tonight," he said simply. The mutters turned to grumbles, but none dared argue further. The widow could not understand. Why was this human, a soldier, protecting her? What did he see that others did not? The smell of food filled the air. A pot bubbled over the fire, carrying the scent of meat and bread. The widow's stomach growled so loudly she pressed her arms around it in shame. The little girl noticed and giggled. "She's really hungry, Dad. Give her some." The father did not smile, but he poured a small bowl and handed it to the widow. Her hand shook as she took it. The steam rose up, the scent almost too much to bear. For a moment she only stared, afraid it might vanish like a dream. Then she tasted it. The first bite burned her tongue but filled her with life. Tears blurred her eyes as she swallowed. It was only a small bowl, but to her, it was everything. Warmth spread through her body, and for the first time in months she felt human again. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. Her people's tongue was harsh, the human's tongue even harsher, so she only lowered her head, whispering a silent thank you to the firelight. The soldiers around her did not soften. One of them leaned closer to another, whispering too loud to ignore. "She'll spy on us. Just watch. She'll bring her kind here to kill us." The widow heard it, and her heart twisted. They would never trust her, no matter how empty her stomach, no matter how broken her body. To them, she was only danger in a different shape. The father's voice cut through their whispers. "She stays as long as she works," he said. "She carries her weight. She earns her food." The widow's head lifted, her eyes wide. Work, she thought. She could work, she could clean, cook, guard, anything to stay near this fire, anything to stay alive. That night she was given a place near the edge of the camp, a rough blanket, a corner beside the wall. It was not comfort, but it was shelter. The girl came to her, eyes bright. "You'll be safe now," she whispered. "I'll take care of you." The widow almost laughed. A bitter, broken laugh. A human child taking care of an alien widow? The universe was strange indeed. When the girl left, the widow lay on the blanket staring up at the stars through the cracks in the roof. Her body was weak, but her mind refused to rest. She thought of her husband, of the war, of the hunger that had almost killed her. And now she thought of this man, this soldier. He had not smiled, not even once, but his eyes had not held hate. That made him more dangerous, because hate she understood, but respect was new. The night grew colder, and she pulled the blanket tight. Her heart asked the question again and again. Why? Had the little girl chosen her? Out of all the strangers, why her? And why had the father not pushed her away? The answers lay in the silence, waiting for the future to speak. At dawn, she rose to the sound of marching boots. The camp came alive with orders and shouts. The father stood tall among his men, giving commands. His voice was steady, strong, not unkind, but sharp. The widow watched, unseen from the shadows. This man was not only a father, not only a soldier, he was a leader. And if she wanted to stay, if she wanted to eat again, she would have to prove herself to him and to all who doubted her. Her chance would come sooner than she thought, because already in the dark corners of the camp, someone was whispering, someone who did not want her there, someone who was planning to make sure she was never trusted, not by the father, not by the girl, not by anyone. The alien widow woke to the sound of human voices. The camp was busy, soldiers marching, orders shouted, fires burning low. She sat up on her rough blanket, the cold still biting her skin. Her stomach growled, but she remembered the bowl of food from last night. That small meal had saved her from breaking, and now she had promised to work for her place. She rose slowly, her body weak but her spirit stubborn. The little girl ran to her with a smile. "Come on," she said. "You can help me today." The widow followed, still nervous, still unsure. Every soldier's eye seemed to follow her, some filled with suspicion, others with quiet anger. Her first task was simple. She gathered firewood with the girl, her thin hands gripping rough sticks. She carried water from the well, heavy buckets. Pulling at her arms, the soldiers watched but did not stop her. Some muttered, "Look at her, pretending to help." Others scoffed, "She only works for food, nothing more." The widow heard every word, and each one stung, but she kept moving, silent, determined. By afternoon, she was given a harder task, cooking for the men. Her people's food was different, their spices strange, but she listened carefully, copying how the humans prepared meat and bread. The smell made her dizzy with hunger, but she did not taste. She only stirred, only served. When the soldiers ate, they said nothing, but the little girl clapped her hands. "She did good, Dad, the food is tasty." The father gave a single nod, his eyes meeting hers. It was not a smile, but it was enough. It was respect, small but real. And for the first time, she felt maybe she could belong, but not everyone wanted her there. In the shadows of the camp, one soldier glared. His face was sharp, his voice bitter. "This alien will betray us, Just. Wait," he whispered to another. "We'll make sure the captain sees her true colors." His plan was simple. If she would not fail, he would make her fail. That night, as the camp grew quiet, the widow rested near her corner, her eyes closed but her body tense. She could still hear the laughter of men, the sound of boots, the distant hum of machines. She did not notice the soldier moving in the dark. He carried something small, shiny, dangerous, a piece of human tech, a stolen communicator. He slipped it under her blanket, close to her hands, then vanished before dawn. When the sun rose, the shouts began. "Search the camp," a voice called. "A communicator is missing." The widow sat up, confused, her body shaking. The soldiers spread out, their eyes hard, their boots heavy. One soldier strode to her corner. "There!" he shouted, pulling the device from her blanket. She stole it! The widow gasped, her eyes wide with horror. No, she whispered, shaking her head. But the soldiers grabbed her arms, pulling her roughly to her feet. Voices rose in anger. I told you she was a spy. She was waiting to call her people. Throw her out before she kills us. The widow struggled, tears burning her eyes. She had done nothing, but no one believed. The little girl ran forward, shouting, she didn't do it, she wouldn't. But the soldiers ignored her. Even the father's face was dark with doubt. His eyes searched the widow's, looking for truth. Her voice broke as she cried, I did not take it, I swear. The commander stepped forward, his voice cold. She is a danger, Captain, he said to the father. She cannot stay. She will betray us. We must throw her out now. The camp grew silent, waiting. The father stood tall, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. He looked at the widow, at his daughter, at the angry men around him. The choice was his. The widow's heart pounded. If he chose against her, she would be thrown out, back into hunger, back into death. She wanted to scream, to beg, but her voice failed. The little girl clung to her father's hand, her eyes wide with tears. Please, Dad, she whispered. Don't let them hurt her. Before the father could answer, a sound split the air, a loud alarm, sharp and violent. The camp shook with shouts. Attack! Someone cried. We're under attack. The soldiers scattered, grabbing weapons. The widow was shoved aside, falling to the ground, her heart raced, her body trembling. The enemy had come, and the humans were not ready. She looked at the girl who clung to her father's side. Fear burned in the child's eyes. The widow's own fear twisted into something else. This was her chance, to prove herself or to be cast out forever. Her hands shook, her body weak, but her mind made a choice. She would not run. She would fight. The battle cries grew louder. The sound of gunfire shook the air. The widow rose slowly, her eyes fierce. She would protect the girl. She would protect the man, even if it cost her life. The camp shook with chaos. The sharp sound of weapons cracked through the air. Soldiers ran in every direction, shouting orders, pulling on armor, grabbing rifles. Smoke rose from the far wall where the first blast had struck. The enemy was here, and they were fast. The widow pushed herself off the ground. Her arms still ached from being pulled by soldiers. Her heart raced, but not from fear of death. She looked at the little girl, who clung to her father's leg, eyes wide with terror. The child was trembling, her voice stuck in her throat. The widow knew in that moment her choice was clear. She could flee into the dark and vanish, leaving humans to their war, or she could stand here and risk everything. The commander shouted, Keep her locked down, Captain, she'll betray us, the yay. First chance she gets, but before the father could answer, another blast shook the camp. The wooden wall splintered, enemy shapes rushing through, alien raiders with sharp blades and burning eyes stormed forward. The widow recognized them instantly. They were not her people, but scavengers from another world, hungry for loot, hungry for blood. They would not stop. Not until every human was dead. The widow's hands trembled. Her people's training came back to her in flashes. Her husband had taught her once, before the war destroyed everything, how to fight, how to survive, how to strike with speed. She had buried those skills, hidden them under her grief. But now, they burned in her blood. She grabbed a fallen spear from the ground. Her fingers closed tight, her body moving on instinct. The first raider charged toward the little girl. The widow did not think. She only moved. Her spear struck fast, piercing the raider's chest. The creature collapsed at her feet, its weapon clattering to the dirt. The humans froze, stunned. An alien widow had just saved a human child. The father's eyes widened. For a moment, even he did not speak. The soldiers hesitated, torn between distrust and shock. But the battle gave no time for doubt. More raiders crashed into the camp, screaming, blades flashing. The widow spun, her spear striking again and again. She fought not for food, not for survival, but for the girl's small life. Her thin arms moved with strength she had forgotten she had, and each enemy that fell proved her choice. The little girl cried out, "Dad." She saved me." The father pulled her close, then shouted to his men, "Hold the walls, defend the camp." His voice was iron cutting through the storm. The widow fought beside the humans, her steps sure, her strikes deadly. Every soldier who saw her now looked with new eyes. She was no longer just a starving stranger. She was a fighter. But the danger was not over. The raiders pushed harder, breaking through with fire and rage. The widow's body burned with exhaustion. But she did not stop. A blade sliced across her arm, and she cried out in pain. Blood ran down, but still she stood. Another raider swung for the girl. The widow blocked it, her spear snapping in half. She fell to her knees, gasping, but the girl's scream gave her strength. She lunged with the broken spear, ending the raider with one desperate strike. The father reached her side, pulling her up. His strong hand gripped her shoulder, steady and firm. "Why?" he asked, his voice low. "Why fight for us?" The widow met his eyes, tears mixing with blood and sweat. "Because she believed in me," she whispered, nodding toward the girl. "And because I could not watch her die." The father said nothing, but his eyes softened. Then he turned, shouting orders once more. The humans rallied, inspired. They pushed back, their fire cutting through the raiders. One by one, the attackers fell or fled. The battle ended in smoke and silence. The camp was broken, the walls shattered, but the humans still lived. The widow collapsed near the fire, her body shaking. She pressed her hand to her bleeding arm, her breath sharp. The little girl ran to her, wrapping small arms around her neck. "You're my mom now," she whispered through tears. "You saved me, and I don't care what they say." The widow froze, her chest tight. Those words pierced deeper than any blade. Mom. She had lost everything, but in this human child's eyes she was something again. Her tears fell freely, her arms wrapping around the girl in return. The commander approached, his face pale, his voice shook with anger, but also fear. "She saved us, but she's still dangerous," he growled. The father stood tall between them, his voice like stone. "She stays," he said firmly. "She has earned her place." The soldiers muttered, some still doubtful, but none dared argue after what they had seen. The widow, once accused of betrayal, now sat bleeding but alive. Her hands still shook, but inside her heart was a spark of pride. She had chosen to fight, and for the first time she felt she had truly been seen. Yet in the darkness beyond the broken walls, eyes still watched. The raiders were gone, but someone else remained. Someone who had planned to frame her, someone who hated her even more now, and they would not stop until the alien widow was destroyed. The camp was quiet after the battle. The smoke still curled into the sky. Broken walls leaned, scorched and weak. The ground was littered with blood and ash. The humans worked quickly, patching wounds, counting losses, repairing damage. The widow sat near the fire, her arm wrapped in rough cloth. Her body trembled from pain, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had fought for them, bled for them, and yet her heart felt unsettled. Some soldiers still stared at her with suspicion, whispering behind her back, but others had seen her courage, and their eyes no longer burned with hate. The little girl never left her side, holding her hand as if afraid she might vanish. "You're safe now," the child whispered, "because you're with us." The widow closed her eyes, her heart twisting. Safe, she thought. Could an alien widow ever be safe among humans? She had saved the girl, saved the father, saved the camp. But danger was never far, and she could feel it waiting in the shadows. The father approached, his steps heavy, his face calm but unreadable. He looked at the widow, then at his daughter. "You fought well," he said, his voice steady. "Better than many of my soldiers." The widow lowered her head, unsure if it was praise or warning. "I fought," she whispered, "because she believed in me." The little girl smiled and squeezed her hand tighter. The father's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "You have earned the right to stay," he said, "but trust is not given in one night." The widow nodded. She knew this truth already. Her heart ached, but she did not argue. Days passed, the camp rebuilt slowly. The widow worked harder than ever. She carried heavy wood, cooked meals, cleaned weapons. She did whatever task was given without complaint. At night, she sat with the little girl, telling small stories in broken words. The child laughed, clapped, and sometimes even cried. In those moments, the widow felt alive again. But the whispers never stopped. One soldier in particular watched her with hate, the same one who had planted the communicator under her blanket. His plan had failed, but his anger had grown, and now he waited for another chance to destroy her. That chance came one dark night. The camp alarm rang again, louder than before. This time the enemy came with fire raining from the sky. Dozens of raiders stormed the walls, armed with rifles and blades. The humans scrambled, shouting orders, rushing to defend. The widow grabbed a spear from the ground, her body already burning with fear and determination. She would fight again, no matter the cost. The raiders poured in, their weapons flashing. The widow stood before the little girl, shielding her with her body. The father barked orders, his rifle blazing. The camp turned into a storm of smoke and screams. The widow fought like fire, her spear striking with desperate strength. Each enemy that fell was another moment for the child to live, but then the wall near the supply tent collapsed. Flames swallowed the wood, spreading fast. The raiders pushed through the gap, heading straight for the girl. The widow saw it happen as if in slow motion, a blade raised, a shadow falling toward the child. Without thinking, she threw herself forward. The blade cut into her side, deep and cruel. Pain exploded through her body, but she did not stop. She struck the raider down with one final thrust, then collapsed to the ground, gasping. The little girl screamed, dropping to her knees beside her. "Don't die, please don't die," she cried, her small hands pressing against the widow's wound. The widow's vision blurred, her body heavy. Blood poured hot and fast. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I told you, I would protect you." The father rushed to them, his face pale, his eyes wide. He dropped to the ground, his hands steady even in panic. He pressed cloth to her wound, shouting for a medic. "Stay with us," he said, his voice rough. "Don't you dare leave." The widow looked at him, her tears mixing with sweat and blood. She saw the fear in his eyes, the respect, the unspoken truth. For the first time, she felt not like a burden, not like a stranger, but like family. Her hand weakly reached for the little girl's cheek. The child's tears fell onto her skin, warm and desperate. "You're my mom now," the girl whispered, choking on sobs. "You can't go, not now, not ever." The widow's heart cracked with emotion. No words could carry the weight she felt. Her world had been empty, but in this child's voice, she had found meaning again. Darkness pulled at her vision, pain dragged her down, but she fought to stay, clinging to the warmth of their hands. She had lost everything once, and she would not lose this. The battle raged around them, but in that circle of fire and tears, time seemed to stop. The widow's sacrifice had changed everything. The humans saw it, the father saw it, the child lived it. An alien widow had bled not for herself, not for her kind, but for them. And in that act, she had become something more. The night faded slowly into dawn. The camp was broken but still alive. The smoke drifted into the pale sky, carrying the bitter scent of fire and blood. The wounded were gathered, the dead were counted, the walls were patched once more. And in the center of it all, the alien widow lay on a bed of rough cloth, her side bound in tight bandages. She was weak, her breath shallow, her skin pale, yet her eyes still opened, still held a faint glow of life. The little girl never left her side, clutching her hand with small fingers. Sometimes she whispered stories, sometimes she only cried softly, but she never let go. "See," she told her, "I said you can't leave me, you're my mom now." The father stood close, silent and steady, his eyes never far from the widow, his face unreadable. But the truth was there behind the hard lines and the scars of war. He had seen her fight, seen her bleed, seen her protect his daughter with her very life. And in that moment she had become more than an alien widow to him. She had become someone he respected, someone he could no longer ignore. When the soldiers gathered, the commander spoke harshly. "She is still a danger," he growled. She will never be one of us." But the men did not answer like before. They had seen her sacrifice. They had seen her blade protect the child. One soldier finally spoke, his voice heavy with shame. "She fought harder than I did. If she is a danger, then so am I." Others murmured in agreement, their suspicion no longer so sharp. The commander clenched his jaw, but he could not silence what had been witnessed with their own eyes. The father's voice cut through the noise, steady and unshaken. "She stays," he said. "Not because she is my daughter's wish, not because she is weak, but because she has proven she belongs." The camp fell silent. The decision was made. The widow closed her eyes, her tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Not tears of sorrow, but of something she had almost forgotten. Acceptance. Days passed, and her wound slowly healed. She walked again, her steps unsteady, but her spirit burning. She worked as before. Though her body ached, the little girl laughed with her, sang with her, called her mother without fear. And the father, though still quiet, no longer watched her with suspicion. He spoke to her of duties, of plans, of the future. His words were short, but his respect was clear, piece by piece. She was no longer just an outsider. She was part of them. The widow sometimes sat alone at night, staring at the stars above the broken walls. Her heart still carried scars, memories of her husband, of her lost people, of endless hunger. But now she carried something new, a human child's trust, a soldier's respect, a place at the fire. She had lost everything. But in this strange world she had found family again, yet peace is never whole. In the shadows beyond the camp, unseen by tired eyes, danger still lingered. The soldier who had framed her watched from the dark, his heart filled with venom, his pride shattered. He had failed once, and the alien widow had risen higher, but he swore she would fall. He whispered his anger to the night. "She may have fooled them, but she will never fool me." And far beyond the horizon another threat waited. The raiders who had fled had carried stories with them, stories of a widow who fought beside humans, stories of an alien who chose their side. Such whispers spread quickly. Enemies listened, allies doubted, shadows gathered. Her fight was not finished. It had only begun. The widow stood by the fire with the little girl one evening. The child's laughter filled the air, pure and bright. The father watched them, his face softening just enough for a rare smile. In that moment, for the first time, the widow felt whole, but deep inside she knew the truth. The world beyond these walls was still broken, and soon new storms would come. Still, she whispered to herself, "I will fight, not just for food, not just for survival, but for them." Her hand brushed over the girl's hair, her eyes meeting the father's steady gaze. She had been nothing, a starving widow, unwanted and forgotten. Now she was something more, a protector, a mother, a partner in a war-torn world. The fire crackled, the night was calm, but the story of the hungry widow was far from over. Because in the darkness, unseen eyes still watched. And the true test of family, loyalty, and love had only just begun.